right, welcome back to APIs You Won't Hate. This is episode 18, our first episode for the year 2022. Should we make it there? Phil and I are recording this a few days shy of the new year, so anything could happen between here and there. Phil, how's it going, man?
Well, I suppose life is, as always, a little bit confusing and a bit hectic, but yeah, I'm still kicking. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm hanging in. It's the end part of the year, which is definitely a little bit of like work tailing off and uncertainty around holiday travel and all that kicking in. So the anxiety is really just shifting flavors at this point. And, you know, I'll figure all that out as we get there. But I live in the Southeast US and all my family's in the Northeast US. So one of the things that I get to deal with this time of year is figuring out if it's safe to go from here to basically the New York area and or how to get there and whether I'm going to, you know, walk, fly, drive, whatever, you know, that's how it goes, I guess.
You own a bicycle.
I do own a bicycle. I also have an electric car.
You got some options.
Yeah, I was planning on driving. And then I pulled up the New York Times like COVID tracker thing today, and New York has absolutely spiked. Oh, yeah. They're at an all-time high, basically. So we should also mention, too, our comrade, brother-in-arms, Matt Trask, is not with us here today. He's off on holiday end of year. Quick shout out to Matt, but he'll be back with us probably for our next episode.
Still alive then? Just not another bike crash?
Near as I can tell. Yeah, Matt's actually seems like he's becoming a semi-professional maybe, or at least serious hobbyist photographer for cycling events in his area. His if you follow him on Instagram, he's mostly posting really, really great like action shots of cyclocross races in Nashville, which of course with cyclocross is like people, you know, panicking as they're sliding through mud. So
that's amazing. Yeah, some of the like best cycling memories I've got are in cyclocross, where you've just got like photographs of 10 cyclists on top of each other in an intertwangled mess, then you'd have no idea how anyone got in that situation. So if he keeps at it, he's going to get some just gold photographs.
Yeah,
it's good to see.
Definitely.
I saw he finally he got paid for a photograph that he did for the first time, and that was like, I think you're literally a professional now. Like if someone's paid you to do the thing, then you are actually a professional at that thing.
That absolutely counts. And you know what? Actually, speaking of, this is our first episode of the show where we have a sponsor. So we're very excited to kind of get through that. We put out a call for sponsors a couple months ago and had some conversations with some folks and landed our first sponsor. And let's take a break here to hear from them. This episode of APIs You Won't Hate is brought to you by Lob. Lob is a group of passionate people working towards their vision of increasing connectivity between the offline and online worlds. They help developers send postcards, letters, and checks as easily as email through RESTful APIs. Lob is looking for engineers at all levels interested in joining a successful growth stage startup. They offer collaborative culture, supporting teamwork and mentorship. Their founders have a strong vision of building a product-led organization, and it's an opportunity to have a big impact on Lob's business and engineering culture. Lob is built using open API specifications for contract testing, generating documentation, and soon SDKs. Their API is written in a mix of JavaScript, Golang, and Elixir, and their customer-facing dashboards are built with Vue.js. If you're interested in joining Lob, check them out online at lob.com/careers. Thank you so much to Lob for sponsoring APIs You Won't Hate. All right, and welcome back. So, Phil, what's on your mind today? What's going on in your world? How's work things?
Work things are different. I've changed jobs. It's the first time I've quit a job that I actually liked. Like, I have no complaints about it, which feels nice. So I left Stoplight after about 2 years of being there, helping them with DevRel and product planning and design and a bit of code here and there. And now I am self-employed for 2 different companies. I run Green Turtle, which I think I might have mentioned a little bit in the past. It's kind of my Dutch company because I've become a Dutch resident. Part of being a Dutch resident, like it just works out really well for like tax and stuff if you kind of create a company and give yourself a job. So the joke was originally that it's my shell company, Green Turtle. Right. And but yeah, I'm actually doing tech consulting for a bunch of different people. So technically, you know, I was consulting for Stoplight because, you know, I'm in Europe and stuff. So they were like my first client, but now I'm starting to take on more clients and spend a bit less time doing tech stuff because I'm trying to balance it out. About 50-50 is the goal with tree stuff. So I'm now working a lot more on Protect Earth. And it's still, you know, chair of the board of trustees. It's an unpaid role, but I'm doing a lot of stuff in the background, a lot of like, as well as planting trees like every single day at the moment because it's the middle of tree planting season. I've just been on a 10 day in a row rampage planting trees. I'm also kind of writing some software to make all of that work. And so there's kind of a bit of a blurry overlap where Green Turtle stops and Protect Earth starts because I think I'm going to start making some kind of reforestation at scale software that, Protect Earth might be a free client of, and then kind of expand that out as a software as a service to a bunch of other people. So I'm kind of learning a lot about the reforestation space and getting into green tech in general is the goal.
Yeah, wow. That's quite the jump you've made, and actually fairly abruptly from the outside perspective here. So what's the balance of your time looking like between the two jobs? Is it mostly with the Protect Earth stuff?
Yeah, mostly. It's really bad. I didn't have enough time to do both well. I couldn't do Protect Earth just evenings and weekends and have a 9 till 5 like normal job. And so I thought, I've been getting away with doing like Saturday, Sunday, and a little bit of weekends and a bit of a lunch break work for a while. I'm sure if I suddenly have 5 full working days, then I'll have loads of time to do client work and this tree stuff. And that hasn't happened at all. I've just started to like massively scale up how much tree stuff I'm doing. So now I'm driving in an electric car, thankfully, to different sites and walking around farms with all the farmers, and they're like showing me around and getting me in their Range Rover and driving up the like sideways hills and just like, probably put a field over, woodland over there. I'm like, yeah, sure. So it's just like a really weird change. Like 4 or 5 days in the week, I will be on a farm planting trees or looking at some land that we could then plant some trees on. And I'm hoping that will come down a little bit, partly because right now is tree planting season. November to March is when you get most of it done. And so there's a lot of work to be done with not only actually planning the events and actually planting the trees, but trying to kind of hook up funding for those trees and different businesses that want to sponsor, and partners like Ecology who pay for a lot of the trees, and like improving the APIs and improving the project management system, right? Because I've basically got like everything's in Notion. I've got a Kanban board of all these different reforestation projects as they work through, like with the ecologist and with the government getting grants and with various other groups and with whoever sourcing the trees. My mum is head of, she is the procurement officer. So she's like phoning up all these tree nurseries. Yeah. And now whenever I call her, I have to be like, Mum, what call? Okay, so this nursery is a little bit late with these, blah, blah, blah. And then other times it's like, Mum, personal call. How you doing? But yeah, we've got this whole thing. And so there's the actual admin overhead work and the physical work. Basically, I'm throwing myself massively in the deep end, trying to figure out what all the problems are, what the bottlenecks are, holding back an organization from handling loads of reforestation projects at once. Because then once you've found the different bottlenecks, some of them can be fixed with personnel, some of them can be fixed with software, some of them can be fixed with a combination of both, perhaps. Other volunteers, staff, funding, partnerships. There's all these different solutions to different problems. And so a lot of it, honestly, is being fixed with Notion. Like, not getting paid to say that. I've just been putting everything in there because before there was all these crazy emails and the status of everything is just in people's heads. Like when you've got maybe 6 projects happening in 3 months, you might be able to remember, there's only 2 happening in December and 2 happening in January and 2 happening in February. You can kind of keep on top of it. But we've got like 10 projects currently happening. And some of them are really complicated, like 50,000 trees and whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot more leads. Like I had a tweet go viral and it had like 5,000 likes and 5,000 tweets. Me just being like, hey, if you want to plant trees, I'll swing by and have a look, right? Hey, it'll be great. And then it just blew up. And so we've had to install HubSpot so that we can kind of track all of those leads and track them through their different lead statuses. And then once that's ready, we can plop them into Notion and, get them graphed up and all this other stuff. So I'm kind of hoping that it's going to be mad, like full-on scrappy overtime crying at your laptop startup for a little while. And then, we're going to hire an ecologist who's going to do site visits. So that's most of the work sorted. And then like they're just tracking through leads and seeing what's going to be viable. And then we've got, the project management stuff so other people can keep an eye on things. And we've got, a few other members of staff and a bit more software being written so that it will be kind of fairly autonomous. The donations come in and pay the ecologist. And so it's my job to go and find a bit more money and a few more donations, but it's not like 6 days a week, 7 days a week, all the time forever,
Yeah, sure. It sounds like you're rounding the corner from like a an idea to a scrappy startup in a big way here. Like, having run a company in the past, this is one of those things that definitely feels familiar, right? Where you start to have like more customers than you can remember names for, or the last conversation you had with them, and using tools like HubSpot and all that is definitely the sign of hitting like a certain level of exciting maturity that will probably have you shrieking and crying at various different points. That's really cool. So when you're using Notion, are you using the functionality that it has where you can essentially like publish a public or semi-public website for people to go check in on as well? Or is it all just a sort of private notes database, whatever you want to call it, that you use yourself?
Yeah, it's mostly the back end. So we've got have like, planting sites, and we put all the information in there, and then that'll have information about how many trees and how many acres, and does this project need grants or not, and does this, who's the landowner, and then so we've got like a whole little people section and with a little CRM in there, and who's responsible for the weeding and the mulching and all the specifics that you could easily forget, right? And then we can attach things like we have different phases of work, so woodlands and hedgerows and wildflower meadows, and we might do woodland, a little bit of woodland now, and then another bit more woodland next year, and things like that. So we can track different phases of different projects and different kind of estimates that are associated, and convert those into orders, and then see which suppliers supplied which tubes for which projects, so that if all the trees at that project die, we know that we should probably stop using those suppliers. Because and just loads of kind of metadata about it like that, which just really helps with the organization, because we've got Slack where we chat about different things, and that's all like ephemeral stuff that's going to vanish. And then we have like there's contracts signed with various people about various things, but then that's just kind of the current, like, that's almost the source of truth about like where things are at and what they're doing. And so it's basically CRM, project management. I really wanted them to have an API. We ended up using Airtable awkwardly as well. So the actual trees, when we plant trees, we take photographs of them with a little custom app that a volunteer made. And it will upload the photograph and the coordinates, and we have to enter which species it is when we do it. And that will kind of plop it all into Airtable using the API on the iOS side, and then feed it back into our own API, which is built in Laravel, which Matt made. And that will go off to the funding partners. And so that, for now, is all in Airtable. And what's been really interesting, as it started off, like Airtable was just kind of a database that we could be bothered to build a whole API for, to track the trees. And then that started growing more into kind of like maintenance, and like we're going to go back there and see how these trees are doing and see what's going on, and like that one's dead and that one's dead, so we need to replace those, and that looks like there's been a lot of deer here. So that's kind of an ongoing state. And then Notion is kind of creeping in from the other side. It started with purely kind of planning, and now that's also ongoing. And I want to have things like, it's kind of got like, how many trees are you planning on planting and how many have you currently planted? And then, Airtable also has a list of all of them. And so at some point they either need to integrate, or one will just eat the other, but they're both very similar systems at the moment, but they just have slightly different properties. And like Airtable has had an API when Notion didn't, but they are both kind of really similar things. And I'm very curious as to see which is going to be the source of all truth, because right now they're kind of owners of their own little part of the domain. But there's a lot of low code.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like, I mean, you could imagine someone who's not a 15, 20 year veteran of building software solutions for things actually going and being reasonably successful trying to cobble together something like this with those tools as well. You're also getting into a part of like solution design that's really fascinating, because a lot of the like assumptions we make when we build software is usually like, this thing's going to be perfect, and I know exactly this accounting system because it's just dollars, and if I subtract 100 there'll be 100 less. But like, you're planting trees, some of them might not take, some of them might get eaten by a deer, some might get knocked over, whatever the case may be. You have a lot of data that is impermanent at best, maybe, or uncertain on some level, and that's kind of a very cool like style of problem to think about. All the various different like statuses of things that can happen.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that I want to start getting into. And again, this is kind of where Green Turtle might end up kind of taking over a little bit, which is there's a lot of data that you can get from the data that you're putting in, right? So one thing would be, should you water the trees or not? Some people say yes, some people say no. Some people won't water trees at all, and it would lead to larger numbers of fatalities. But the ones that survive are going to be much tougher because they've had to put their roots a lot deeper to try and find water. unless there's like a 2-month drought, at which point if you don't water all your trees, they're probably mostly going to die. And so that can be quite tricky stuff, especially when a lot of these projects, Protect Earth might have 20 projects that have 500 each, and they won't be able to get to all of them in the space of a 2-month drought. But not everywhere in the entire country is going to be in drought at the same time. Some areas might do better than others. And so it can be quite hard. If you think about something like Protect Earth, there's lots and lots and lots of reforestation and rewilding groups out there that are all fairly low tech. There's just some people with spades, right, without taking the piss. And so giving them solutions about like, this is when you should do this, or like, maybe this is why lots of these things died, could be really helpful, because you can do things like, we know where all the trees are, so we know how much rain they've been getting roughly in that area, not on an individual tree level, but that area got rain. And the weather forecast says there's no rain coming for like a month or whatever. So you should probably go and water this project. But that one, don't worry about it. It had rain last week. You just didn't notice because you weren't there. And so just little things like that can start to be really helpful, because obviously it's all money and success. Like, these charities don't have infinite money, and they don't have infinite time and infinite volunteers, and they have to prioritize where they can. And you want as many of the trees to survive as you can. So anywhere that you can use kind of APIs and data and glue it all together to help predict where you should focus your efforts is going to be helpful, you know?
Yeah. You've just gone and made me sad about the disappearance a year or two ago of the Dark Sky API, which was like a super nice and super terse, like hyper local weather service that was really, really good at giving, simple stuff to anyone who wanted to use it. And of course they got acquired by Apple for, I think, hundreds of millions, like a ton of money.
Did they close that API down and make it useless?
Yeah, they closed it down. They removed the Android app. I think the iOS only app now is merged into weather for iPhone. So it's gone. There are other, weather solutions as well. I actually, for a long time, had a weather station that I kept on my roof that talked to maybe weather.com or something like that. Like there's a more scrappy API that's kind of like a network of whoever wants to set their stuff up. And it's very cool. Like the amount of stuff you can see, it's interesting how many of these little weather stations exist that you can talk to. Like there's, I live in a fairly dense city, but I don't know, a 5-mile radius of here, there's probably 50 to 100 different tiny little weather stations of people running out of their homes, which is like, that can give you a pretty good idea of where exactly it did rain, within neighborhoods, which is pretty cool to see.
That is interesting. Like, what is that weather station? What sensors does it have? What can it tell you?
Yeah, I'll send you some more details, but it's got like wind direction, temperature, amount of precipitation. So it has essentially like a little cup that measures rainfall. And there's a number of other things like dew point and, things so you can predict the coming weather as well as what is happening. But I think in your case, probably the amount of precipitation and type would be the most useful, as well as, the temperature actively there. It's super easy to set up. Like it's the kind of thing that I got as a gift and like set it up in a matter of minutes, and it's battery powered and the batteries last ages. So
that's really cool.
It's got a little, actually, I think you put rechargeable batteries in it, and there's a tiny little solar cell on top that just keeps them topped up.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, once it's set up, it's almost like zero maintenance. Yeah, and I'm sure it's gotten better. Mine is 6 or 7 years old at this point. There's probably even simpler ones to set up.
I like that. And if you get an alert saying it's gone off, there has been no sun for a long time, its final act of telling you the weather is there has been no sun for the last 3 days, and I am knackered on battery. Farewell, little guy. That's really cool. I mean, that again, like all this stuff, I still need to get step 1, 2, 3, 4 done. But at the moment, we're kind of focusing the API on. I'm just getting it over to Heroku because it was on some Laravel thing that I didn't have a clue how to deploy. Matt just shoved it up there, and I'm like, where is it? But making the API we've got a little better, and then working on some of the extra functionality in the background. But there's just infinite things you can do, because there are solutions out there that are like, you can pay loads and loads and loads of money, and you can monitor like a 10,000 hectare project quite easily. You can look at satellite images, and they can tell you roughly how many trees you've got. And they can take a guess at what species they are and how well their growth is doing. And, they can tell you loads of stuff by looking at really high resolution satellite images. But that satellite imagery is expensive. And so if you've got, an acre over there and then an acre, 100 miles down the road, it's pointless. You can't do that. And so these other ways of monitoring your smaller projects for a small team start to become pretty handy. And some of our projects, like, there's a farmer, they can look out their window and go, not on fire. So it's fine, but but some of them are a bit more awkward because we are intentionally planting. We're trying not to use up like productive agricultural land, and therefore it's not the flattest, easiest, most accessible bits. It's the slopey, awkward, round the back a long way from a road bits that we couldn't get a watering truck to if we wanted to, if we even knew there was a problem. So it's not easy to go and have a look at them all the time. And even drones, like we'd have to give an 80-year-old farmer a drone and tell them to go and fly that around. And I'm sure plenty of them would be fine with that, but not all of them would be. So there's, looking for more solutions that are very hands-off what we want to do. And hell, it could be sticking some of those up. You know what I mean? For larger projects, stick one of those on your roof. I'll install it for you. Don't worry about that. And then that can tell us how things are doing in your area. But yeah, I just want to keep looking into ways to glue things together and make life easier for these projects, because I know 2 other projects who are kind of seeking funding in the same way, where they have to take a photograph of every app and they have to integrate this kind of similar API that it shows where all their trees are and all their coordinates and all their what3 words. And I know how much hell we had getting it all together in a rush during planting season, where we're spending all of our time planting trees, but also we need to get paid for those trees. So we have to like hire someone to put the code together, and then, but that's more money that we have to spend. And then more time that we don't have if we do it ourselves. And it's just bloody annoying. Like most of these small charities don't want to be setting up Airtable or writing an API or doing any of that crap. So yeah, if I can just make a SaaS, initially Protect Earth can use, and then anyone else in a similar way, and it'll be like charge them a few quid a month. And our data shows that your survival rates will go up by 20% if you use our software. It feels weird trying to like get money out of charities and stuff, but also like if I can help them, save them time and mean that they don't have to like hire an iOS developer or something, then that's also probably not being the worst person in the world, is it?
Yeah. No, not at all. And I think one of the really fascinating things about working in like even the specific part of the charity world that you're in is that your competition are also just allies.
Yeah.
There are people who are approaching the same mission with the same end goal. And so, I'm sure if like some whale of a charity came along and they were being wildly successful with planting trees, like that's not a cause for anger. That's like celebration at that point, right? And so anything you can do to help is a good thing.
Yeah, and there's some other stuff like we at the moment the slowest thing we have to do is like walk around taking a photograph of every tree with this iPhone app. And like there's some things I can do to the iPhone app to make it a little smoother. And I want it to be like Tinder for trees, Tinder for saplings, where you can just like swipe, and just real fast. And it's like it's a bit clunky, but it gets the job done. But when there's 5,000 trees, that's going to take me like 2 days to photograph all that shit. Like you run out of battery, you run out of space on your phone. It's awful. And so, yeah, drones maybe, right? We've been toying with the idea for a while. Sometimes you'll see reforestation projects and they're in big straight lines. They're in grids. And sometimes that's not great. It's not particularly great to do that for various reasons. A lot of it's aesthetic and maybe it's not good for temperature regulation. It is really convenient for like mowing between them, which is why some people do it. Some brands require it. I don't particularly like that too much, but it makes it very easy to take photographs because you just walk up the grid, down the next row, up the next row, down the next row, and it sucks, but it's quick. A lot of the projects we do are completely randomized. You tell planters to like take 2 or 3 steps in any direction and shove a tree down and then like spin around and do it again. And it's just totally random, which is awesome for the woodland. It looks totally random, especially because different people are different heights. So 2 or 3 steps is very different, but it's bloody impossible to get photographs of that. Like I'll get a Sharpie and I'll scribble on the top of the tube and then I'll go and take a thing. And then I realize that I've lost 100, which is like £300 for charities lost. So I have to like run around trying to find them. And it's awful. So we wanted to get drones involved, but most of the scanners, most of the software we found doesn't like it when the QR code is rounded. Right, these round tubes, it can't handle the fact that the QR code's bent. So either we do some like algorithmic flattening of the QR codes, if that's even a thing, or we have to like get little plant labels, these little wooden things, and stick the QR codes on those and put them down. It's all a faff and it's a bit annoying, and that requires the volunteers to like manually mark them out. But at the moment, they're having to like get a Sharpie and manually write down alder. That's 2 different trees, and they get confused. They write the wrong thing. Or one of them was sick of writing bird cherry, so they wrote burr, BIRCH, which is birch, and that's a different type of tree. So I was like, which birch? Is it downy birch or silver birch? Why did you write it wrong? Oh, fuck, it's bird cherry. So like if we could just kind of remove the human error aspect of that and just stickers, and those QR codes have stickers.
Yeah.
And then we just plop those out with all the trees. Then we can just send drones out doing a grid formation of everything. And it can just take we've written some software already that will go through a video, take out all the frames, look for a QR code, take the UUID, dedupe all the UUIDs, right? So that's done. It just needs to then be taught to like go in and get a decent close up of each one after it's been done. So it could do like a first pass to work out roughly where they all are and like how many UUIDs there are. And we can make sure that matches up, or we can tell it to go do another lap. But then, yeah, like the getting a nice photograph that you'd be happy to see on your ecology profile or whatever, that's the later job. But there's a load of things like this that would just make life so much easier for reforestation charities, because none of them are going to get a chance to do this. And like, if I say, I don't even know, like £10 a month, and you won't have to spend an entire day walking around a field photographing shit, people will be like, yeah, take that money.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to reach out to what are they called, Boston Dynamics, and see if we can get you one of those scary dog robots to go around. And
yeah, I will spin on a dime with my opinions.
That's kind of a pretty good use case for them.
I will spin on a dime and start supporting those fucking killer robot dogs if they can make me not have to take photographs of 5,000 trees. Absolutely.
Yeah, right. I mean, one might not be too scary, but if you're out in a field with 40 of them, I think I'd be a little nervous.
Yeah, and deer prevention is an important topic. So if we can get those Boston robot dogs to have guns on them, we can take out deer.
I tell you what, that's one of those problems that I feel like I'm learning more about. Like, I never really understood quite the challenge that deer provide when sort of unchecked. And of course, they're unchecked because we've gotten rid of a lot of natural predators, over the years. But even here, like in a fairly major city, there are tons of them. My morning cycling route, I usually see, 20 to 30 on a 20-mile ride. And that's a stunning amount of large mammals that are, out in the wild. And I'm sure there's more that I'm not seeing when I'm out there.
Yeah, there's a million things. Like, this has nothing to do with tech at all, but to make it vaguely tech, like Zach Kitzmiller, a friend of the show, he was saying, like, I don't know why you're doing all this work. Trees have been evolving naturally for millions of years. I'm pretty sure they'll figure it out, right? And he's taking the piss. But like, yeah, humans have wrecked things so badly that we actually do now have to use quite a lot of assistance to bring it back. Like, the fact that we killed off all the wolves and all the bears and all the predators means that there's loads of animals further down the chain that have just exploded. And because of fragmentation, like wolves need, 1,000 hectares or whatever to patrol. And now there's like highways and houses and suburbs everywhere. The fragmentation has meant only smaller animals can survive, the ones that are happy in a garden or whatever. So we've generally knackered the natural environment to the point where there's so many things trying to eat those saplings, because you also have to think about how industrial agriculture has made like miles and miles and miles of, essentially they call it green desert, where it looks quite nice, but it's no real food. We've ripped out a lot of hedgerows. You might not have as many of them in America. They're a huge thing over here, but we ripped out loads of our hedgerows, which were berries and different things they could eat. And a lot of the patches of woodland have been cleared. And so there's just like herbicide sprayed crops. And in the winter, that means there's nothing, because things like, holly will give fruit year round, like little berries year round. So, birds used to eat that. But if you rip everything out, they've got nothing. So when you come along in winter and you plant a bunch of saplings, which are at that point just a tasty snack, they're like, the bark is soft, you can get into them easy. All the animals go, "Hooray!" Like, I've been planting trees and deer have been watching me going, "I'm going to come back for that in a minute." I'm like, fuck off. Yeah, so things are just so knackered that you kind of unfortunately need all these big, sometimes plastic, sometimes cardboard tubes. We've had cardboard tubes fail in the first year, so we kind of are ended up using a lot of second-hand plastic tubes, which at least has a lower carbon footprint, and we'll collect them up. But there's all these things that you have to do to try and guide these woodlands back to success. And things like, natural regeneration are massively popular as well, but they don't always work in certain areas because you have so many rabbits and deer and shrews and moles and voles and whatever else that they'll just eat anything that pops up. So you have to wait ages for a bird to fly past and shit out a seed, and maybe that germinates and maybe that sprouts, and then it gets chewed in half immediately. And then you wait another 50 years for a few more to come along. So yeah, there's just a lot of assistance needed to help reforestation happen in any sort of relevant, useful time frame to help the planet at all.
Yeah. Turns out it's a pretty complicated problem we've created for ourselves there. So given that this episode is going to be our first one for the year, and I know people tend to be in kind of a reflective mood at the beginning of the year, or really the end of the year, but maybe we'll come down on the other side of it here. What do you think that this project will look like in 12 months from now? So the end of 2022, if things go well, what are some goals for you for the year?
I'm really looking forward to getting our hands on our own piece of land. So we at the moment are working with landowners, and I want to keep that going. But I'm really looking forward to getting hands on a bit of land. And we've got some land that we're in the process of buying, which is like an ancient replanted woodland. And that is amazing because it used to be an amazing temperate rainforest. They just gutted it and put a bunch of like non-native timber in there, nothing that should have grown in this country. And it's just kind of sad to see. But hopefully in January we'll have the keys to that, and I can just cycle down there. I can just start taking down some of the smaller stuff, and then we'll get the timber company to start selectively taking a few other bits of wood out. Like every 5 years, we'll take 25% away, improve the light down to the floor, and get the natural regeneration kind of going. And there's already little like tiny oaks and little tiny ash trees and little tiny everything. So yeah, like more of a focus on acquiring land to protect long term instead of working with landowners. I mean, as well as working with other people. So yeah, kind of like creating our own. I call them like the ancient woodlands of the future, but like our own bits of land to nurture. And then hopefully maybe I can chuck a caravan on one of them and I won't be completely homeless forever. But that's my goal at the moment. It's like yeah,
That'd be nice.
It's like really step things up, get staff, make it sustainable, make it not rely on like charity from me in the form of like my income or like a bunch of my time, and make it be a thing that like powers itself is what I'm looking to do over the next year. Because I think we might have talked about it before. It's a topic that comes up a lot. Is like, we all want to save the planet, right? Like I know you're as concerned about the future as I am perhaps. And everyone's trying to think like, well, should I try and get the highest paycheck that I can working wherever so I can like donate as much of that to good projects as possible? Or should I throw it all in and go broke and go work for some charity for a tiny paycheck? And luckily, that's a bit of a false dichotomy these days, and you can actually get paid quite well working on great projects. But I was stuck on the like maybe this job isn't entirely jiving with what my current priorities in life are. So I was thinking, but I am getting loads of money, and I can use that to fund really good things at this charity. And I was like throwing thousands of euros in there a month and stuff. But then I started to realize that like I'm not making it self-sufficient. Like it's entirely reliant on when decisions come up. Should we do this? Is this a good idea? I'm like, screw it. If it goes wrong, I'll just pay for it, right? Like that's not making a sustainable company that will grow. And if I get hit by a bus, then the whole thing just goes bankrupt. So yeah, my new focus is like, using my time to get it scalable and self-sufficient so that it's not reliant on me. And that's what I want to see. Like I want to see people donating to the charity that like don't know who I am, and like people coming along to planting projects that like aren't on my Twitter. And it's getting there. Like,
right.
We're starting to get lots of volunteers and people I don't know, but I want it to be like, who's Phil? Whatever, shut up.
Sure. Yeah. That's a fantastic feeling when it happens, and that like level of serendipity is almost, I mean, you can't rely on things going viral for this kind of success. Like it really needs to be something that is snowballing on itself, and that you have a growth to yourself. So those actually sound like pretty reasonable goals for the next year. I mean, it sounds like you're going to have the keys to your ancient wild there in the next couple of weeks. So that's really cool. I actually didn't know that was that far along. The sustainable thing sounds maybe a little more challenging. But like, that's why it's a job too, like that's something you can work on and think about and be actively critical of, and hopefully make some little bits of progress that add up to large amounts of change there too. That's super exciting, man. I'm glad to hear it.
Do you have any goals for the new year?
Yeah, it's an odd one over here. So mine are both lofty and not lofty. I feel like I have a lot of coals in the fire right now that are keeping me busy. One thing that's happening, hopefully next year, if we can keep our sort of pandemic under wraps here, is I'm in the middle of planning my second wedding with my only wife, where we eloped last year. Well, we eloped last year and didn't get to have a party, essentially. And so hopefully later in 2022, we'll be able to actually see our families and give each other a hug in front of other people.
Yeah, make it a bit more real, get those photographs.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm kind of working through that. I'm still working. My job at Google has been going well, and definitely like we're facing some interesting end of year challenges and product planning journeys, which will be a long while before I can even really like talk about them openly and before they'll pay off in ways that I think will be interesting for us to chat about on the podcast here. But at the same time, like we've been making some pretty big strides for the APIs You Won't Hate site. This is something that we also sort of rounded a corner in the past year or two now, maybe, where this thing went from something that's like a fun project where we put out these, good and useful things for the world to like, I don't know, starting to cost time and money that made it more of a cost center than just something that was, running itself. And so getting this back to sustainability would be really nice. And that's why we've been doing things like placing ads on the site and talking to sponsors and trying to find ways to just make the site run itself a little better and hopefully be able to do things like sequester some money to go plant some birch trees in ancient woods in the UK and things like that. So for me, that journey looks a little bit like figuring out how to make something that gets a reasonable amount of traffic into a sustainable and self-growing state, hopefully, and pay attention to the signals that can help us out. And I'm kind of doing that for myself as well, all on the mission of providing a little more autonomy and opening up a little bit more of my time. I think I'm exactly in that other sort of state that you were just talking about, where some of my like driving forces right now are that mission of like, well, let's pad the pockets a little bit and then work on projects that are meaningful and empowering in whatever way they may be. I spend a lot of sleepless nights thinking about energy consumption and things like that in the US, and I think if I had an axe to grind here, it would be with power use in particular. Like I live in this brutally hot city with sunlight 300 days of the year, and almost no one has solar power on anything, and we absolutely should. And like I would love to see more of that happening. So I'd love to get into that one day.
Google did something, Project Sunroof, a while ago, and I felt like it was really half-assed. Like they did the really intelligent bit of basically being able to say, this is how many megawatts your roof could generate or something. And then when it came around to, okay, yeah, I want to do it, sign me up. It just Googled Nashville solar or whatever. Like it would just put the name of the place and then that was it. And you'd be like, how are there any subsidies available? Are these people rip-off merchants? I'm just seeing lots of paid ads here. And I feel like if they could have worked with if they could have got some people on board, like, in each region or something, there's something you can do to help take that to people that's not just piss off and Google it, because you could have just pissed off and Googled it without going to Project Sunroof.
Yeah, totally. And so actually, given that I work at Google and Google sort of has their famous 20% projects where theoretically I should be able to carve out one day a week to work on something else, that group was one of the first like groups of people that I went to talk to and see if I could spend some time with them working on things. And the very perhaps frustrating corporate long and short of it is that like the answer was yes, but it's not ready yet to hit its sort of next stage of growth because of, XYZ quarterly goal, whatever the case may be. But Project Sunroof still exists and is still like the data is updated and still pretty good. The tricky thing is I don't know what it's like in Europe, and I'm actually curious to hear what this is like in sort of your neck of the woods for people buying solar things. But exactly what you're saying, where you get shelled out to this thing that's like Googling solar power in Nashville, is the results you get are really shady. Like they're very confusing, and it really is just a sales pitch. And it's like the first thing you'll see is like it'll be free. You'll get a free solar panel. You'll never have to pay a dime for it. And really what ends up happening is you generate power that goes into someone else's pocket and you still have an energy bill or whatever the case may be for 30 years until it pays itself back. And so like those things, if you have the spidey sense for it, immediately feel shady and you start to run away from it. And the other side of it, if you go and do the research, is you can go and buy and install solar stuff and pay companies that'll, just install it. And the financing model for that might be a mortgage or a lease or whatever you want to call it. But in the end, you own them. It's all very, very confusing, right? Like,
it's really hard
to find out is there enough sun in my area for this? Do I have enough surface area in my roof or my land or whatever to generate meaningful power for my home? And will it create problems? Like if I go to sell my house in 5 years, will I have a lien against the house because there's these unpaid for solar panels on the roof that make it really hard to sell the house and something like that? And like, to be perfectly honest with you, that sounds like something that I could blow out of the water in terms of creating a meaningful and useful like sales experience. If I, had the hours in the day, I think that'd be the kind of project that I would tackle. and hopefully get, I don't know, I think it's a stretch to think that 1% of homes in this 1 million person city that I live in have solar power. Like, I think it's probably 1% of 1% that have solar power at this point, and it absolutely shouldn't be that way.
I can't remember which states and what. I've listened to a lot of stuff. I think Sustainababble, I think it was them who did a really good podcast on solar, and they talked about how, was it them? Never mind. I'll try and find it and put it in the show notes. But there was a really good podcast I listened to recently that talked about the different problems in different areas. And in some countries in Europe, like Germany, used to have a really good feed-in tariff, then they kind of got rid of it. England used to have an okay feed-in tariff, then they got rid of it. Now they give you like 2p a kilowatt if you put solar on your roof, which never even pays itself back. And so is there a feed-in tariff or not? Yes or no? How much? Is another really powerful data point that Project Sunroof could have. But opposite to feed-in tariffs, some states actually charge you a tax for having solar on your roof, and that should be illegal. I think Alabama definitely have it. And it's literally, if you put a solar panel on your roof, we're going to tax you for every kilowatt of potential energy that you have, because that is like hitting into our profit margin, which is insane. You don't do that for anything else. Like, oh, well, you used to buy 10 ciders a week and now you're only buying 8 ciders, so we're going to tax you an extra $20 or whatever. Like, piss off, I'll buy what I want to buy.
Yeah.
So, and obviously that's ridiculous. I'd never buy less cider. But things like that, like the hard parts, that's kind of why I was like, I did momentarily forget that you work for Google, but that's why I was kind of grumping about it, is that they've done the really like data sciencey, hard, impressive part of saying, like, put in your address, we're going to load up Google Earth, we're going to like look at the satellite image of your house, we're going to do some AI image recognition to figure out which way your roof is facing and how big. That's bloody amazing. And they didn't bother to do that, but there's no tariffs in your area, so you have to go with one of these guys, and then they own it, and that's a bit weird. Like, that's the easy part in my mind. If, like, come up with a list, start in America with the states, sure. Do it state by state, sure. Start in the most, like, sunny areas or the areas that get the most searches, and start answering those questions and take people's emails and give them a shout later. Like, treat that like a startup, and it could be really useful, because you can tell people it's not worth bothering. You've got a tax in your area. If you bothered to get a loan to get this solar panel, it would just make your bills go up. So why would you do that? But click here, because there's a petition that we started that that is going to overturn that law. Like, there's so many things that someone the size of Google could do if they really want to put time into it. But I know they've got a lot going on. But getting more solar on roofs is just an amazing thing to work on.
It seems like it would be the kind of thing that you could knock out of the park. And it almost seems like the sort of thing where maybe the responsible thing for Google to do is to provide that data and give it away for free, right? Like, hey, we have all this data on what sunroofs or what roofs can get sun. You take this and do what you will with it. And hopefully, someone comes along that does the free market thing and, makes us the service that we're talking about, that does this better than Google could, because of the million different red tape things that get in the way when you can't badmouth companies that buy ads on your platform or whatever the case may be, right? It's understandable that those problems happen, I think, on some level, and also very, very frustrating, especially for companies that are like committed to reaching net negative carbon by 2050 or whatever the case may be. It's sort of like, yeah, but you could help so many other people scale their thing.
Sure. Well. I said a bad thing about Google. Let me say a good thing about Google. So one of the other things I mentioned, Green Turtle is kind of building green tech in regards to building tech for people who do sustainable things, but it's also helping people green their tech. So that's the idea of making whatever it is that your tech does. You sell tickets to events, or you sell whatever, your Google, just making that more sustainable, reducing the CO2 output of that. And one of the things that Google do, which I think is quite impressive, is they are one of the early adopters and big adopters of Electricity Map. And Electricity Map, if you've not come across it, it's made by Tomorrow. They do good things. And it basically tells you what is the carbon grid intensity of your current area. So it might be state or region or something, but how much CO2 is being spewed out of the grid in your area for every kilowatt hour being used, right? And so that changes throughout the day. If you've got loads of solar where you are, then in the middle of the day, it's probably going to be a lot less than at night, right? Where they might spin up a coal plant to get that going. And so one of the cool things that Google have started to do is I think they gave a bunch of money to Electricity Map, and they've got access to their forecasting model. So not only do they know this is the carbon grid intensity right now, but they know, and it will be this much at 4 in the afternoon or 3 in the morning. And so they've started moving a lot of their computationally really heavy processes over to that. And I've talked to a bunch of people in a bunch of places, maybe on here, maybe not, about that. There's ideas like that and a million others. So I'm just going to be like a green tech consultant for companies that want to reduce their emissions. Because if you think about it, what a lot of us do, you've got a cron job that's going to run every hour. Does it need to run every hour? Probably not, right? Let's do every 6, or let's do once a day, or whatever it is. Get it as low as you can. And then you can kind of track how much CO2 that's actually using, but you can also move it. Do you need to run that process at midnight? Why are you running it at midnight? Is that just because when you wrote the cron job, it was easier to go 0, 0, 0, 0 than it was to do like 0, 4, like it just felt obscure? So you can find out in your area when is a good time to run a process and automate that. And there's a million different things you can do, like background jobs and other things. And you can use Cloud Carbon Calculator. If you search those words, something will pop up. But it's like a tool that you can put all of your Amazon Cloud, Google Cloud, all of that, put your billing information into, and it will tell you how much CO2 is coming from different parts, because it knows you've used 5 hours of EC2 in this region and 6 hours over there and all these different things. So it can give you a graph of like, this is how much CO2 you're creating overall. This is how much is coming from EC2 or from other services. This is how much is coming from, like, these are your worst performing regions. Like, stop using EC whatever. And so like step 1, track it. Step 2, figure out how to reduce it. Step 3, reduce it more. And Google, a good case study that I provide when I talk to companies about things like that. Because if you think about, they're training AI models that are huge and doing all these crazy processes, and they're trying to offset everything they've got. So if they're spewing out CO2 all over the place, they've got to pay loads of money in offsetting that, which still isn't the best way of doing it. Great, you planted some trees, in 50 years that CO2 soaked up. Thanks. Like, if you could avoid doing it in the first place, that's better. And so they are putting a bit of time and effort and money into avoiding producing the emissions that they would then only have to offset anyway. And that might be profitable. That might save more than they would have spent. So I like that they're doing that. It makes it easy for me to then say, hey, this is something I think you should do. Like, who does this? Google? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, no, we'll look at it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's I actually didn't know about that. I'd love to know more. We will stuff some of that stuff into the show notes so that we can, share that with our listeners too. I have meant to ask you for a bit now. Do you happen to know the troublemakers behind ecoping.earth? Do you know those guys?
Sorry, I have heard
those folks. I guess I don't know who's making this. Yeah, relatively small presence like on Twitter at the moment, but they essentially will do an audit of your web property and tell you sort of the estimated carbon footprint of a hit to your website. And we'll give you a score based on, image sizes, traffic, where the data is coming from, where it's being routed and stuff like that. It's a pretty interesting tool. And they're like free tier. Yeah, their free tier gives you a daily notification about how your site is doing. And so I've been tracking that for my own site and kind of dragging it through there. Notably, we probably need to do better with APIs-you-won't-hate.com. But
I have actually been looking at that. Like
over the holidays
I forget. It's really hard to make a Gatsby site do the reasonable thing. I feel like I don't know why. Like, there's so much happening. There's so much like Ajax-y stuff. Like, it's basically a static website. If there's something we can do that just like genuinely creates HTML and then it's a HTML website, that would be cool. Because that's what Jekyll was, and it was so fast. And I looked at it and I was like, oh man.
Right.
I put it through something like EcoPing, but it was like, I looked on Cloudflare, and it was like 30% of your, no, like 12% of your requests are cached. I'm like, it should be 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. No shade to Gatsby, because I haven't been doing a great job of keeping up with sort of the new for APIs-you-won't-hate.com. But I am about halfway through every few years rewrite of the site, this time using Next in this case, because I found it to be much easier to work with for the type of static site we're building, which is really just a bunch of markdown files and images. There's sort of first-class support for responsive images and WebP and stuff like that, and had a much easier time getting Next sites to be SEO friendly, importantly, which will help other people, more people find our site and things like that. So making pretty good progress through that. And then, from there, we can address some of the things like running images through. Actually, one of my new favorite tools is Squoosh, which I'll put in the notes here too, SQOOSH.app. which will let you resize an image. Like it ingests an image and it'll spit it out with a smaller file format, essentially. And so obviously, if you have a pre-optimized image, it won't do that. But it essentially does things like sharp and resharper and all those things do, in the browser. So if you're running a small site and you're just uploading to WordPress or whatever.
That's awesome. And can you get like different size images without awkwardly randomly making it a GraphQL query internally? Is that something that Next does?
Sure does. It does, yeah. And it has done so in a way that is not completely broken or frustrating at all. And so I think the next version of our site built on Next will be far more performant, easier to deal with, faster to build, and will add some additional feature support. Like one of the things I've been meaning to do is add the capability to add a canonical link to someone else's site. If we repost an article for someone, it'd be nice to do that. Hopefully my project over the holidays between, Christmas and New Year's
That's amazing. Thank you for working on that. Yeah, there was just so many weird things with like, instead of saying something logical, like if you put a reference to an image path and then you load up the website, instead of saying like image not found in your browser, it just would refuse to even start the server. And it would say things like, property of objects is, you can't get a property of an object because it's null. And what that means is it couldn't find the image, therefore it couldn't change it into the right GraphQL fragment, therefore it couldn't do something else. And I'm just like, what the fuck? So yeah, it'd be nice to have a system that's not just all awkwardly based around everything being a GraphQL query for no reason. I'd be happy about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. They went in and did a bunch of clever things that are like really nice if you have a gigantic, million page site where like your image might load first and it might show an SVG that approximates your image while the image is loading in the background, and all those like cool like bells and whistles that make absolutely no meaningful difference for us when we have one image per page. Like there's a lot of cool bells and whistles in there that we just don't need. And hopefully with using Next, we'll be able to do better and make it a little easier to edit and have people submit posts and stuff like that. So working through what that'll look like, I think we'll get there in short order and hopefully be able to do a bunch of things better than we have been doing now, up to and including saving the site for offline mode. If you have an article that you want and you want to pin it to something, you could do that if you really wanted to. But, those things also aren't necessary, right? Like you probably don't need a JavaScript worker running in your iPhone to keep our site up to date every once in a while if you're only pulling down an article.
We haven't posted an article for a couple of months. I don't think we need real-time updates. Which reminds me, I'm going to work on some posts. So one of the main things I'm trying to do over the next year, got my fingers in a lot of pies. I want to find ways to make them work together. So right now I'm actually doing some work for OpenAPI for the Linux Foundation. We'll talk about that another time. But they want me writing a bunch of articles and doing a bunch of stuff, right? And so I am currently writing an article, which I'm going to put onto APIs You Won't Hate, which is basically profiling Akita, which is a really cool bit of software that looks at real-time traffic and then gives you OpenAPI, amongst other things. But it will look at stuff going through a proxy and then say, this is roughly what I think the OpenAPI should be. So I've used that to make OpenAPI for the Protect Earth API, because we just built it. And then we didn't have any OpenAPI, and I want to start doing design first and having contract testing and doing all this stuff I usually do. So I used Akita to make OpenAPI for the Protect Earth API, which I then uploaded to Stoplight, obviously. And now I'm writing an article which is going to go on APIs You Won't Hate for the Linux Foundation. and it's going to be, and I'm going to use that OpenAPI to then, like, for the work I'm doing at Green Turtle, make more improvements to the API over time. And so I'm trying to not really double dip, because they don't all pay very well, but I'm trying to kind of find ways to work on all the things in the most efficient way possible.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, Green Turtle is paying for most of the API development work being done. And so if I can like make that be a story that lots of people can follow, and like maybe I even start streaming the process of creating that Protect Earth API, and then that is all still work for OpenAPI because it's raising the profile of how this all works and making them happy. So hopefully I can just make everyone happy by being a little bit clever with my time.
Yeah, without a doubt. That's also solving the problem of making Phil scale, right? Like that maybe is your theme for the coming year, is figure out how to make Phil's many efforts scale. Like make every hour count for 2 or 3 is going to be a useful thing to do there. Well, Phil, we're coming up on an hour of chatting here. I think it might be time to say goodbye here. Any parting words for the new year? Any thoughts, feelings, anxieties you want to share with the world?
Be nice to people. I don't know. That's all I can think right now. I'm sick of people being daft. We're in a fun point where we've stopped, where people aren't really climate deniers anymore. They're just kind of climate delayers, and we're all just arguing about the best way to save the planet. And I just want people to stop screaming at each other and try and work together on saving the planet. So yeah, I'm going to try and be a bit less of a grump this year. And let's all give that a go. And let's all like come up with creative tech solutions to knock some of the 4% of world emissions off that the internet's currently causing. Let's see if we can fix that together.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I've made steps in that direction myself. I think for me, a meaningful step is just removing myself from places where negative voices show up. And so that has taken the form of culling a lot of news sites from my life and removing some folks from Twitter who just add negative energy to me. And honestly, like some personal acquaintances and friends in ways that I'm, interacting with them makes me angry because they're shouting about how masks.
Delete Facebook. You don't need to listen to your great aunt's opinion about masks. You can just delete Facebook.
Yeah, hey, that's fair too. That's a completely fair point. So yeah, be nice to people, I think, is a good a good theme for the year.
Nice to people and delete Facebook. Two goals.
Perfect. Yeah. That's a nice meta goal. I'm into it. For meta too. Yeah, perfect. Even better. Phil, it's been fantastic catching up with you. We will chat again in a few weeks. Until next year, please take care, be healthy, be safe.
Yeah, cheers. Have a good one.